So my name is Abigail Lorenzen. I am with Right to Life of Northeast Indiana, and this session is called Apologetics in a Box. So there's the very formal introduction for you guys. I'm Abby. Hi. So here's the goal today, for me at least, is that in my work at Right to Life in the Fort Wayne area, I get to focus in now on presenting. So presenting to our churches, presenting to our schools, to whatever group calls me up and says, hey, could you come talk about something, right? So we span the entire life movement, conception to natural death, and it has all sorts of topics in there, but you can imagine the topic I get asked to present about the most is abortion, right? So 8:30 in the morning, this is going to be a lot of back and forth, so warm it all up. Yeah, so abortion, I'm going to close this. Just, are you coming into 21? 23, all right. Enjoy. If you see somebody, beckon them in, yeah. So I get asked to talk about abortion a lot. A lot of our schools, that seems to be the thing that the kids run up against the most. And so, okay, if it's the most pressing, then it's going to get most of our attention. So some years ago, I put together a presentation to be able to use with older students, actually for the Higher Things Conference. And then was thinking, well, what about the little kids? Because babies love babies. So why aren't we doing anything with that? My thought is if we can foster respect for human life starting from little people on up, then as they continue to grow, by the time they hit high school, if they have this respect built up, I think it's going to be a lot harder for people like Planned Parenthood to say, oh, those don't matter. Like, what do you mean they don't matter? Because it's just embedded. So, if any of you guys have been past my booth today or been past Lutherans for Life, or maybe has everybody seen these guys before? Are they new to anybody? Okay, who in here has a school attached to the church? And do you have a set of these at the school? If you don't, you can get a set for free from Lutherans for Life. So these are fetal models. They come in a couple different sizes, and I'll pass them around today so that you can feel them. But this is the set that you can get through Lutherans for Life. Their goal is to put a set in every Lutheran school in the country. So please do tap into that and get them. If you have trouble finding their booth, let me know and I can help you. There's this additional tiny little set. Come on in, sit wherever you like. This little set is really impactful too. I don't think they cover it. I think it's like $150. But it's worth it, and I've got some of the information I think in there. I can always send you the link if you're interested in this kind of a extra complimentary set. Again, I'll pass those around in a minute. So I use the models, and as you can imagine, right, 2-year-olds they're like this, and they won't give them back. They're just going to snuggle them forever. They recognize that unborn people are worth protecting. And they're fascinated in the growth aspect. Like how do you grow? And they want to know that. So that's the younger kids' presentation is all fetal development. And it's so fantastic to watch them learn those things. The older students then I switch over and start talking, okay, pro-life apologetics. How do we know that all human beings are equal? And as such, deserve equal protection under law? And can you have a convincing argument? Can you have a convincing conversation based on those ideas? Can you convey to people without the conversation exploding? Right? Because abortion, in vitro fertilization, surrogacy, physician-assisted suicide, these topics tend to explode in people's faces, but that conversation's not going to go anywhere, right, if it's combusting. So how do we actually have really good conversations? So I have our website up here because our goal is to make it really easy for anybody who wants to use the materials that we have to use them. They've been working really well for us, and it's kind of this, like, maybe it's a jumping off point for other people. If something's useful, then great, please use it. So this is the page, and if you're interested in using them, I can give you this URL. This is the handout that I've got at my table, so it looks familiar. And then the presentations are up here. So what you guys have in your hand is the presenter outline for the 8th grade through adult presentation. Okay, yep, grab one of those outlines. But what we're going to start looking through today is the presentations themselves, because I just want to give you kind of a walkthrough. The idea being that I can present these all day long in my area, but I can't come to Napa, California and present, right? So how about you do this, right? How about you do it in your area? And sometimes it takes finding the right personality person to do it. But I want to walk you through what these presentations look like. Okay? So this is all fetal development. And the schools really like it because we don't talk about abortion unless one of the older students brings it up. But I'm always doing these presentations in small sections, right? So maybe kindergarten and first grade together, second and third, that kind of thing. But I'm never doing K through 7 together, right? And you can kind of get why that wouldn't work. Talking to a first grader about how babies grow is very different than talking to a 7th grader about how babies grow. Though we have really good success keeping both groups in between conception and birth. So we don't talk about how conception happens, and we don't talk about how birth happens, right? That's parents' jobs. Usually I like to leave it with them unless somebody asks me to come in and talk about that, but they don't. So we're going to keep it inside of this realm, and there's plenty to talk about in there. The kids don't have trouble staying inside of that. It's pretty nifty the way it works. So don't be nervous there. But the fetal development one, and this is the one geared towards the younger students, just takes you through, really simply, the growth of a human being. So we start, and in the outline that's on the website there, it gives you more details about how I go through stuff. But the beauty of this is that I've made it general on purpose. Because human development's fascinating. You can read up on it and say, okay, what are my favorite things? What do I think kids are going to be really interested in learning? And you can add those in kind of as you go. So I always ask the kids, we're going to see pictures of how babies grow. For every picture that you see, I want you guys to raise your hands, tell me everything that you see that's different, that's interesting, or you don't know what it is, you want to learn, right? They're like, oh yeah, good. I'm good. See all the things. Good. And with the little kids too, you can start with, how many of you guys have a baby at home? How many of you guys have a mom or an aunt who's pregnant? And get them, because they know a lot about babies already, and they're happy to share that information. So it's a good place to start. So we're going to move through this presentation really quickly because it's pretty self-explanatory, and the apologetics presentation tends to be a lot more nitty-gritty. Okay? So again, we don't talk about conception itself. We can talk about how big we start, which is the size of a grain of sand or a sharp pencil dot on a paper. That's how big you start, okay? And in a matter of 3 weeks, this is what you look like. Okay? So with the younger kids, I use all computer-generated images versus actual photographs because I think they're easier to digest for little people. So again, you got to know your stuff to be able to do it, but it's not super complicated. So everybody knows what this is. Umbilical cord, everybody knows what this is. Yep, your amniotic sac. And this is why I hate computer-generated images. This is inaccurate. Your amniotic sac goes from the edge of the placenta all the way around everything to the other edge of the placenta. The placenta is not shown here, and the amniotic sac is drawn incorrectly. Do 3rd graders need to know that? No. When they get to 7th grade, I've got a blend of images, and I do tell them that, right? In part because I want them to know, be careful what you're looking at online. When you Google something, it may not be accurate. Even though, the number of websites that use these particular images, everybody uses them. They seem to be the best ones out there, and yet they're not right. So, worth pointing out to older kids, not to younger kids. Heart, head, spine. It's fun to have the kids bend over. You feel this? What is this? Yeah. So again, really simple things, but giving them a chance to interact and look. Most of the kids will gasp when this picture comes up because they've just never seen it before. And then simple things, right? So your heart has started beating, and you can see the other things that are developing. How about this? Anybody know what this is? See, this is why I love to teach this. Okay, so this is what I do with the kids too. Saturday morning, your mom cracks an egg into the frying pan. What do you see? This is a yolk sac. Does the same thing for you that it does for a baby chick, right? Yolks are not the chick. The embryonic disc in the egg is the chick. But God has packed you a lunchbox. Huh? And it's there until your umbilical cord is up and running. Because as you can imagine, it takes a while to build an umbilical cord and a placenta. That takes a little doing. So in the meantime, you've got a yolk sac. Yeah. So we move relatively quickly through the whole thing. This presentation usually takes me about 45 minutes, and that's including all of the kids' interaction and questions and comments and stories and everything like that. So an ultrasound at 5 weeks, head and tail. Amniotic fluid is the black stuff, which is really cool to point out because they saw the bubble in the first one. Hi.
Hi.
Come on in if you're here to join us. And so again, this is what they're going to see on fridges at home, right? When their aunt is pregnant and they go over to their aunt's house, this is what's going to be on the fridge. So can we kind of see what's going on here? But this is the reality, right? So ultrasounds are fuzzy because we're sending sound waves through skin, muscle, water, and to the baby, and then asking those sound waves to come back to us. So it gets really fuzzy, and so this is actually what's going on here. Again, yolk sac, and they'll comment, it's getting smaller. Eyes, this is going to become your ear, those skin folds there. All right, back, they'll ask why you're hunched back. It's just how you grow. Some of the questions are really, really easy, right? Arm and leg paddles, embryonic tail, right? That's beginning to disappear as you come through 5 weeks. And again, the poorly drawn amniotic sac. It's going to be poorly drawn in all the pictures. Hopping 2 weeks. Again, a lot of the things, and if you stop by my booth, I can give you some easy fetal development fact cards, that kind of thing that you can. The things that you think are interesting are going to be the things that you convey the best. So that's why, again, this is very scant in some ways, because if you're presenting it, then it doesn't need to be Abby's mouth that's making the words, right? And I think, right, so your heart, that's the main thing here. Everything else, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. If you see anything that you don't know what it is, raise your hand. Because sometimes swimming in this pond all the time, I miss things that people aren't familiar with.
Can you go back one?
Yeah. Oops, wrong way, sorry.
Breathing tubes.
Yeah, so this is the presentation for about kindergarten through 4th grade. So you can use the terminology, right? All the pulmonary systems are growing in, your alveoli, right? You can build in some of those words if you'd like to. I'm always good with people learning more vocabulary rather than less, but for the sake of a 3rd grader reading the screen, right, the tubes that are going to connect your trachea with your lungs, that kind of thing. Yeah, that's what I mean by that. And it's a great spot if somebody gets confused about the umbilical cord versus you building your own lungs, talking about, okay, here's the difference there, things coming from mom versus systems that you are growing. Yeah, it's a cool spot. Okay, this jump usually gets a lot of reactions. Again, every picture you pull up, the kids are going to want to say stuff anyways, so just build it in. Every new picture, what do you see? Kind of a thing. They love this picture tons because it looks like a baby. Now hold up. What did the other ones look like? Right? The other ones looked unfamiliar. Yeah? And so our brains and little people's brains try to connect them with something that they look similar to. A tadpole or a dinosaur. Or they'll come up with these things and they'll say them, and that's good. Go ahead and let them kind of figure it out, right? Because that's how the human brain works. We try to relate things to what we already know. What do these look like? And then, okay, well, in reality, they look like people. Because this is what we all looked like. There's nobody who didn't look like this, except for Adam and Eve. Yeah?
My granddaughter had her older two teenagers, and then the son will be 12 this year. And this was a second marriage for her.
Mm-hmm.
And she was pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, everybody was super excited.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she gave birth at 12 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
And they got to see
Mm-hmm.
what the baby was really
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult. And they get to see, and so I hope that, like with the youngest boy, you know,
Yeah.
you think about, well, oh, you know, like, oh, if your girlfriend gets pregnant, that's not going to be a baby.
Yeah.
That, he's old enough.
Right.
That, and the girls, I mean, you know,
Yeah.
they're old enough.
Yeah.
That hopefully that will be an impression
Yeah.
to not think, oh,
Yeah.
you know, we could just have a baby, we will love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Hiding.
I'm sorry you lost your grandma.
Yeah.
I know, well, and it's, you know, for him, it was his first one,
Yeah.
so it was
Yeah.
really difficult.
Hiding miscarriages is, I think, one of the things that has done the most damage to our society in sort of this shockwave kind of a way. That it's, yeah. I could get into that, but we won't today.
The baby was actually born live.
Oh, was it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, we still refer to him by his name.
Yep.
We say, you know, Joseph.
Did you take
this.
pictures?
They did.
Yeah.
The
That's
parents did.
wonderful.
And, you know, she was worried about showing the youngest one, of course, because he's not all that. But they worked it through.
Yeah.
You know, so, and I think that's absolutely
Yeah. Yeah.
so critical.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
He had a baby in her belly, but went to heaven with
Yeah,
God.
right.
And,
Yep. Yeah. So this is,
You didn't say it became an angel.
yeah. So this is that size. So 12 weeks, as doctors' offices usually talk, is 10 weeks post-fertilization, post-conception. So I'll pass these little guys around so you can see it. For practicalities purposes, when I'm passing around little kids, I leave them in the box. And I say, let's leave them in our seat belts. But you can touch them, feel them, whatever. You guys are welcome to take them out of their seat belts. I trust you. They are weighted correctly for how old they are, so it's worth it to pick them up. But it's 7, 8, 9, 10 weeks. And so but just passing them around at the, you know, kind of applicable times is a really cool thing for the kids.
Quick question.
Yeah.
We've been teaching sanctity of life in Sunday school the last couple of years.
Great.
And we use fruit, you know, because there's a lot of things on it. Is that a bad thing?
Fruit's not bad.
Okay. You know, because like blueberry at 5 weeks.
Yeah.
I've seen this shake
Yeah.
And then you bring a butternut squash for like, I don't know, right?
Yeah, if you have the chance to use the real models,
Right.
I would always advocate for that.
Pictures, you know,
Yeah,
posters.
yeah. Did that come in the VBS
No,
kit
it's
or?
We got through some Catholic thing years and years
Okay,
ago.
yeah, good.
On the internet.
Yeah.
It takes a while. So we've had the big posters. Anyway.
Yeah. My only fear with fruit is this, and I don't know that this would even be the case in your situation, is that it's more so with like all the pregnancy apps, right? There are all these pregnancy apps, and they say, okay, your baby's the size of a blueberry, whatever. The language that sometimes accompanies it, and so this may not be the case in your situation, is language of potentiality. The future baby.
Great.
This idea of not now but soon kind of language tends to accompany that sort of thing. Again, it doesn't sound like in your case. And then and this is going to sound kind of stupid, but just the idea that children are not fruit.
Well, I always say this is the size,
Yeah.
the shape, or the size and weight.
Right. And again, so it might not be in your case, but out in the general public, the way that I see moms posting screenshots of their apps with the fruit, like we call people who are in comas vegetables.
Yes.
So now we have vegetables on one end of life and we've got fruit on the other end of life, and it just makes me this much nervous. So if you're doing it in a way that's very clear, then I'm 0% concerned. Go for it. If you have the models at your disposal, they're awesome.
Do you have a life center near you, like a
Pregnancy resource
A lot
center.
of times they'll let
Yeah.
you check out
Okay.
their
Yeah.
models.
That's an awesome point. Yeah, a lot of pregnancy resource centers, or they'll bring them in
Right, they'll
and
make
do a
it-
kind of
right.
complimentary kind of presentation. Yeah.
Do you, at this age group, are you at
at all concerned about, like fetus, zygote, those kind of,
Yeah, so I don't usually introduce those terms K through 3 or K through 4, just because they're bigger words that I don't think they really need at that age. Any older than that, and I'm happy to use them, because people do hear them. People hear fetus, and the term fetus is used to dehumanize the unborn. And so in an effort to sort of reclaim it, I do like to teach it, especially to the high school students and older, for sure. We talk about fetus, embryo, zygote, blastocyst. What are those? It's not that there's something other than human. That's like saying a toddler's not human because they're a toddler. Well, no, it's a stage of development. So yeah, bringing those terms kind of back into the realm and resetting them. What does this actually mean, right? Fetus is Latin for young one. Young one what? A young human. So it actually plays on our side because it clarifies what it is that we're talking about. Yeah, you got to reclaim it. Yeah. So it's totally worth it to do it with the older kids. I don't know. With the younger kids, it might complicate things that don't need to be complicated. Right. Yeah, they may not have heard the term outside of it. Yeah. So jumping, again, a lot of these things, I would encourage you to check out a book on fetal development and kind of buff up on your knowledge so that you can present what you like. Baby consents light. This is a fun one. If I'm trying to not answer questions that parents should be answering, why would I even put that up there? Well, because this is something that kids experience. Kids experience the gender reveals. They hear mom and dad all of a sudden know that baby's a boy or a girl. How do you know that? Right? So people, okay, how do they know if babies are boys or girls? Okay, here's my answer, and I think it's relatively clever. You can say, well, remember those ultrasound pictures we were looking at? Right? You know how they're hard to see what's going on? But doctors are trained to look at ultrasounds, and so when the baby's older, the doctors can look at the ultrasound photos and tell if it's a boy or a girl.
I love it.
Right? Nothing untruthful there, but I'm not taking on jobs of the parents. Right? Everybody gets to maintain their spot, right? So ultrasound photos, right? Can you see what's going on in here? Or should I take you through it real quick? All right, here it is. This is baby Ruth. This is the back of her head, the top of her head, and her face. Her little ribbies, they're so cute. Her back, her arm is kind of bent like this, right? And so her body's sort of shifting back into the distance. If you guys talked about placentas, this is a fun one because the doctor labeled it for you. Again, like who can even see with that? I have no idea how they know that's a placenta, but they do. We don't talk about what the CX means.
Because they're trained to read it.
Because they're trained to read it. That's exactly it, because they're trained to read it. Fuzzy things that we don't know what they are, they can see what they are. And then the amniotic fluid, again, is always, I think, so interesting to see. It's the black. So, and you can see the baby's brain. Look at that. It's just incredible. Yeah. Similar thing, you can tell what this is. This is the first glimpse I ever had of Ruth. I thought it was so cool. This is her belly, head, and the rest of her body. Yeah.
Thanks.
Don't you love that they count them? 1, 2 feet. This is a really cool picture for the amniotic sac because Ruth was all the way stretched out. So see this white line? That's the outline of the amniotic sac. And then by the time you get here, it's fascinating. The little kids go, oh yeah! Just in the course of those couple of pictures, they've gotten a lot better at kind of recognizing, okay, here's what's going on. And by the time you show them this relatively obvious picture, it's very obvious to them. And it's a cool moment for them, like, oh, now I see it. Now I can see it. That's 17 weeks. Again, so this baby is 16 weeks. This baby is 17 weeks. So for the size comparison, it's really fun to be able to, I'll pass these around. They're cold, so warm them up for me. Poor cold little naked babies. Every once in a while I'll have a kid laugh and be like, ha ha, the babies have buns. And you're like, you're right, babies have buns.
So the faces.
The weight's accurate. Yeah. Yeah. So moving on into, this is the beginning of third trimester, right? And then they go, oh! And what are they going to say? This looks like a baby, right? And you can reinforce, well, they all look like babies. This is a familiar picture. And moving closer. So the cool thing too about this presentation is that you can work God in more or less. Now I've never tried to take it into a public school simply because I haven't had the time to. I'm still working on all our Christian schools, which we have a ton of in the Fort Wayne area. But I could edit this for you and take God completely out of it, and you could do it in a public school. And you can still talk about design and development and growth, and he is kind of underlying in there, but the school can put you in. So it's cool in that regard too, I think. If you want to talk about numbers a little bit, so the overall number we're headed for is 40. Right? 40 weeks is a normal full-term pregnancy. Well, the number 40 in the Bible carries a lot of significance as well. So 4 is earth or humanity, right? 4 seasons, 4 directions, 4 elements. 10 is the number of completion. So you have 40 days of rain for the ark. You have 40 years in the wilderness. You have 40 days fasting in the desert. You've got all these 40s because it's earthly completion, human completion. Well, doesn't it make sense that a full-term pregnancy is 40 weeks? So that's a fun little thing to plug to with the kids, to build that in. Again, okay, where'd the amniotic sac go? Poorly drawn. You've got it your whole life. And the kids, some of them won't know what an amniotic sac is. A lot of them won't know. But I've heard the term water breaking. So you can link it there too.
Would the sac still be surrounding that whole?
Yeah,
Would it be shrinking?
so babies, your sac grows with you for a long time. So this is placenta. Here's you. It's great. You've got an umbilical cord.
Yeah.
And the sac goes here. So when you're little, you got some room.
Right.
And the whole thing, it's not going to shrink wrap you because it's filled with amniotic fluid. As you grow, you begin to fill that space and stretch it. And in the older kids' fetal development presentation, I'll show you here in a second, I've got a picture of what a baby looks like who has been born en cowl in the amniotic sac.
So cool.
Yeah, it happens I've got the stat in there, so we'll just do it then. But so again, with the older kids, I do some of those clarifying things because it's worth it for them to know, here's what it actually looks like. And the kids are fascinated. Some teachers sometimes worry about, okay, well, what about the boys in the class? No, man, the boys are totally bought in. Because they don't get to ask these questions usually. Come on in if you want. They don't get to ask the questions. They don't hear the birth stories. How many of you guys know your birth story? Like when you were born, your mother has told you what your birth was like, what your labor was like, how your birth went, that kind of thing. Know their birth story?
Yeah.
A lot of people don't. And that to me is tragic. We're doing, especially our young ladies, but our upcoming dads, right? These are going to be dads. They got no idea what birth looks like. They walk into the labor room for the first time and they're freaking out. And their solution to the problem is to put their wife on an epidural. Well, that doesn't help things, right? And women are like, no, I can do this. And the guys are like, oh, no. So the guys, the little boys, they love the babies. They love the babies.
Let me just interject.
Yeah.
With our last one, she just kept creeping up and, the
Oh,
whole
yeah.
thing. So it's like, 24 hours they finally decide to do the C-section.
Yeah.
So, our era, the men didn't go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so he went in.
Mm-hmm.
And when they were doing it, he said, they're putting your hands in it. And look at that, and you can't feel it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, I've had the natural birth.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was like, oh, this is not exactly the same, but my former son-in-law was over in Kuwait.
Uh-huh.
And he got a kidney stone. And the doctor was a woman.
Uh-huh.
And she said, this is so many honest you compared to what your wife did giving birth to your children, you better say thank you.
Yeah. And these presentations are so fun because you get a chance to give people an idea, like with the weight of the babies. Here, I'll pass this one around. This is 26 weeks, so 2/3 of the way through a pregnancy. Like, people are going, oh, this is heavy. Yes, this is why Mother's Day is important. Get your mom some flowers. Stop skimping. Because she put in some serious work. Yeah, totally. So again, right, with the C-section thing too, talking about those things. Little kids will ask, well, what happens if a baby won't come out? And you can share some of those simplified, right? We want it to be age appropriate, but share some of those things. I have fun because I have had both a C-section and then a VBAC. So my son Tom was a natural birth in every sense of the word. And so I get to, okay, well, I had that happen. Not that you have to have the experience to be able to share those facts, but it's a new experience for the kids to be able to ask openly questions that they're curious about this topic that tends to be shrouded. So it's interesting. And I keep an eye on the teacher's face and make sure that we're in lockstep with, and I'm happy to say, oh, that's a question for your parents. You should ask them that. Yeah, and I'm sure the parents love that. But these are conversations that are good to have. So All right, so that's it for the little kids. Okay?
Have you gotten good feedback on these from parents, or have you gotten pushback, or?
Yeah, I have had 2 schools that have told me after I visited that they got a nasty letter from a parent. But the case was the same in both. There are schools that take vouchers, and they were students from families that were not part of the church community. They're from the outside community sending their kids to both of them are Catholic school, and then are mad that the Catholic school is teaching what Catholic schools teach. And so the principals sort of let me know out of courtesy, but we're like, I'll handle it, don't worry about it, because this is completely keeping, and the teachers...
So they didn't keep you from coming back again?
No, no. And the teachers are in the whole time, they know exactly what I've said, and know that none of it was inappropriate. None of it outstepped what parents want to keep, right? It's just how babies grow. We learn how tadpoles grow. Why don't we learn how human beings grow? This is incredible to me. I've found one textbook for high school students that shows how babies grow in the womb. And it spends all of 3 pages on it, and it's put out by Abeka. That's the only one. Our high school students don't learn how human beings develop, and I think that that's intentional. I think it's spiritual warfare.
Abeka is a homeschooling curriculum for Christian kids, just so you know. It's not a...
Yeah, it's not used commonly. Yeah. So this is stuff that's, kids don't know, well, you guys, a lot of you didn't know some of this stuff. It's just not being taught, and I think it's intentional.
Do the schools usually have to let the parents know that this is coming?
Some of them choose to, and some of them don't. So St. Therese is one that I'm presenting to in March in our area, and what we're doing there, the pro-life committee at St. Therese has asked me to do just an open community night, and we thought, well, if I'm coming into the school, let's make it a couple of days before that, and they can put it out to the parents too. Anybody who wants sort of a foretaste of what's coming is welcome to come, ask me questions, see the presentations. I'm happy to be transparent. These are up online too, right? So that page that I pulled up that I'm pulling these off of, I will send that to principals and tell them, if you'd like to make the presentations available for your parents to look through, feel free. I got nothing to hide, so it's really nice to be able to just be very forthcoming with everything.
I apologize, I wasn't able to make it.
No, you're all right.
I'm really confused. No.
Go ahead.
I'm confused. I've only seen 5, 7, 8 minutes. What is it that parents are upset about that you're showing?
Just that I'm talking about babies. So sometimes, and I don't know the history of anybody in here, so I don't mean this to be callous or anything, but sometimes the loudest voices are ones who are themselves post-abortive. And so if you have a parent who's had an abortion in their past, and they hear that Right to Life was at the school talking about babies, they go ballistic.
Can you call it something other than Right to Life?
I mean, that's who I work for. Like, so it's not that that's the name of the presentation. The name of the presentation is How Babies Grow, or Take a Look in the Mirror,
So when
right?
my husband
But
went to DCE on Life Sunday, he was going to bring in the little babies, what is it, the 12-week?
12-week giveaways, yeah.
And somebody found out about that, and they thought he was going to be teaching. So he was going to go into the preschool and talk about the babies.
Because
And-
babies love
And
babies.
they thought he was going to teach preschoolers about abortion.
Yeah.
And all he was going to do is say, look how you fit in, the hand, and God created you, and all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And oh man,
Yeah.
there was one of the ladies
Yeah.
that just went crazy.
Yeah.
And so they ended up not being able to do it for the preschool or the church.
Yeah. So this is the beauty of having something that you can send them a link and say, this is what I'm presenting. I don't say the word abortion ever. Right? Sometimes a kid will ask, because I get kids who their parents take them to 40 Days for Life. Their parents take them to the local March for Life. They know about abortion, and they say, they ask about it. And then again, in very, very simplified terms, right? There are some people who hurt little babies who are in the womb, but we know that they need to be protected. Or if they're really young, you can say, that's a great question to ask your teacher about, or we can talk about that after class, or something like that, so that you're not exposing kids earlier than what their parents want, right? We want to be sensitive to that parenting right. But if the question comes up, we also want to honor it. I don't want to shut it down. I don't want you to make you feel bad for asking it, because I don't want them to Google things. Right? When people Google things, they get Planned Parenthood, because Planned Parenthood pays millions of dollars to make sure they show up first.
They probably don't have to.
They probably don't have to. Yeah, Google.
Google
Here you go. Yeah.
For sure.
Magically, the algorithm works out for them. Right. So it's this delicate balance of, and you kind of talk to the school, talk to the teachers. What can I show? I'm always happy to sit down with principals, or sit down with a principal and a parent at the same time, so that they can compare and make, it's worth it to do the behind the scenes legwork, because these presentations are very benign. So you just see whatever I have to say. And I'm always happy to edit them, right? Now, if you guys take this as a jumping off point and do your own presentation, that's awesome. If you want to use these, but you need a tweak here and there, that's great too. I'm happy to, call me up on the phone and I'll tweak it for you and send you the new link. That's great too. However we can be a help, that's our goal, is just to be a help. Yeah, good. Any other questions?
One real quick. I missed the beginning too, and I apologize. The church that I work at has a preschool.
Mm-hmm.
At what age would you say is the youngest you might introduce some of this?
Yeah. Formally, I've presented this to kindergartners. Informally, I've presented it all the way down to 1.5 years old. Right? So actually, the younger the kids are, almost the more they understand it. Right?
They don't preach up.
They do this, and you have to trade them for one of the giveaway babies. You can say, here, I'll trade you. You take this baby home, wrap them in a blanket, and you give me my big baby back. Because these are expensive. But it's...
Curly, for a long time, they're expensive.
Yeah. They...
Not just the most.
These ones don't need diapers.
Yes.
Two in college.
Little people love to learn how things grow, right? You take a little person out into a garden and show them a seedling every day, and they're fascinated. So that's kind of the principle behind it. Let's start them young and foster that respect for life. Yeah. So this is targeted towards older kids. You'll see a couple of differences. Most of the things are the same, but here's a difference. Right? So this is what you actually look like. These are photographs, right? This is a single cell embryo. This is right after conception, right? Day 2, you've split into 2, and then 4, and then 8. This is when you're starting to create a placenta, and then blastocyst, you can see it even more so. right? So it's worth it, again, to sort of buff up on your knowledge a little bit. Now, kids will ask me questions that I don't know the answers to. And I'm happy to say that. That's an awesome question. I actually don't know. I'll send your teacher the info. Again, it fosters mutual respect. I'm not an OBGYN. I don't have the answers to all this stuff. And if they've got a great question, then I'm happy to look it up, because I'm always interested in that kind of thing.
The photo on the lower right,
Yes,
so
sir.
is the mass on the right side the baby and the mass on the left side is the placenta?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a common misconception. Placentas are not the mother's. That's not mom's placenta. That's the baby's placenta. And they worked hard on it. Don't you dare claim that. That's theirs. Yeah, placenta, baby. Yeah. So into 3 weeks, right? And I use that photo as a jumping off point. Here's the real deal. Right? There's a book I have down at my table called Birth to Conception, A Life Unfolds. It's like 20-something bucks on Amazon, and it's photographs of children in the womb, but it's done every couple of days during the really fast early development, and it shows actual size, but then it has it large scale and labeled and that kind of thing. But then they also do layers, like here's your circulatory system so far, here's your nervous system so far. It's a fascinating book for, again, the older kids to be able to pass it around and let them just sort of leaf through it.
What's the name of the book?
From conception to birth, A Life Unfolds. And you can stop by, my table is kind of over here. Stop by and check it out if you want. And again, this kind of does your job for you because everything is labeled, but you can flip back and forth and see, like, right? You see why I use the computer images with the little ones, because it's a little complicated, but it's worth it to show them. This one doesn't show the amniotic sac either. It's like out here. Whatever, it's fine. This one got off, I have to fix that. And then a lot of it's the same, right? Here's what you actually look like. Here's what's going on there.
I find that little ones recognize that as a baby.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
one that you
the
just
prior
did
one.
that before that, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. They
Is in the eye.
and they see the shyness,
And the hands.
right? Baby's hiding. Yeah. Yeah, they're willing to jump on the train a little faster. But they're also not garbled up with the idea of evolution. Okay? And this is maybe a good note here, is that you don't have to shy away from people saying, well, that looks like, and they pick an animal. Okay? Or, well, you have gills. No, you don't have gills. But also, right, so 7th graders are into music enough usually that you can use this, but you could find your own metaphor if you like. You say, do you have a favorite musician? Yeah. Can you tell their song right when it comes on? Yeah. Can you tell their other songs right when those come on? Yeah. How? Because they have similar sounds to them, right? Well, God as an artist created the entire spectrum of animal species. Don't you think there might be some similarities? Yeah. And when you all start from one cell, don't you think you might look a little similar for a while? Yeah. It doesn't mean you evolved. Right? It doesn't mean you evolved. There's the real deal. A lot of these are pretty similar. Ultrasounds are all the same there.
Ultrasound is your baby? Is that what you're
Yeah, Ruth.
She was a star before she knew it.
Very cool.
Well, I actually was able to put them in and do the presentations when she was still in utero. And so I'd say, okay, the person in these pictures is actually in this room.
Yes.
And the kids would be like, whoa!
Since I'm not a woman, I don't understand the full. I mean, I'm going to ask some questions that might seem very basic to you.
Bring them.
I'm just trying to understand, because I've heard a lot of the, I've been trying to research what the abortionist arguments are.
Mm-hmm. And we'll get into some of those.
And when you see your ultrasound, so at, let's just say, okay, any woman out there, whether they're pro-choice, pro-life, if they're pregnant, when do they go in for their first ultrasound?
It depends. So if there's someone coming into a pregnancy resource center because they're in a crisis pregnancy and they've been directed there in some way or found their way there, usually they'll try to do an ultrasound that first visit. So we're going to do a pregnancy test, we're going to do an ultrasound.
Let's say it's not a crisis. What I'm trying to get
Yeah.
at is,
Normally?
I keep hearing that, I mean, there's a lot of women I've come across who say, well, it's just a clump of cells. Or it's a zygote, it's this, it's that. I mean, these pictures are so convincing. If you're a regular woman who's regularly pregnant, not under crisis, not under duress, is that there is a time, I mean, because what I'm trying to get at is the women who decide to abort their child, third trimester, have you seen these ultrasounds?
That's a great picture, or a great question.
Has the sonographer gone over with them? It looks like your child is going to be a boy or a girl. Here's their head, here's their beating heart.
Yeah.
How can they later on come to the conclusion, well, it's really just a clump of cells at that point. It's not a being.
Yeah, so...
That's what I don't understand, because
Yeah.
don't they all get ultrasounds?
Depending.
I have children, so I don't know any of this.
So most women see an ultrasound usually a week later than this as their first ultrasound. You go into your doctor's office somewhere around 8 weeks is when they want to see you, and the baby looks like this. And you can't tell anything, but this is actually what's going on, right? So knowing fetal development stuff, I went in for Ruth's ultrasound and freaked out. My baby should have arm and leg paddles by now.
But you can't tell.
Freaking out. I ended up praying like a week later. I was still freaking out, and I was like, God, either she has arms and legs or she doesn't have arms and legs. Okay. And then it was done, right? So this is where, but you can't see anything. It looks like a clump of cells,
But
right?
You can see the heart beating.
So,
by
okay,
that time,
you can see the heart beating,
Does
right?
the sonographer tell them it's just a clump of cells at this point?
It depends on what the background is, right? So different situations, sonographers and doctors will treat the women in different ways. So for instance, we have some really great high-risk physicians in the Fort Wayne area, but I know that when they're counseling a drug-addicted woman, they talk to her differently than when they're counseling a woman who is of good health. Because their solution to the drug addiction is to abort, not to fix the drug addiction. And so they don't do all the, oh, look, cutesy stuff. They're in there just to confirm things, and then they're done. So they...
Economic situations also can dictate whether or not you have access to your ultrasounds and things like that.
That's true, too. Some women don't go in for the prenatal birth.
That's right.
Not an ultrasound that they can see.
Yeah, so this is... Yeah, Planned Parenthood generally doesn't do ultrasounds even because they don't do prenatal care. If they confirm that you're pregnant, then you get sent elsewhere. So they don't even do any of that stuff. This is the age that most women get what's called the anatomical scan. This is the age at which that if they see markers for Down syndrome, then the doctor comes in and talks with you. If they see that only half of the baby's heart has formed, if they see that the liver isn't the size it's supposed to be, if they see that there's swelling in the brain and it looks like there's extra fluid and they've got anencephaly, all of these different things, they start to see markers for in here. This is when things turn for someone who's late term. This is about halfway through a pregnancy. Okay? So at this point, most women who do late term abortions, it's not because they've suddenly decided that they don't want the baby. Usually, sometimes that happens, but usually it's because the doctor said, looks like your baby might have X, Y, or Z, might. We suggest you terminate and try again. That's their wording usually. Or they'll say, we suggest you do a compassionate induction to save your baby from further suffering. So the idea is we're going to induce labor early, we're going to deliver baby, we're going to do zero life-saving care, you're going to hold the baby in your arms until the baby dies. That's an abortion because the intent is to end up with a dead baby, right? So there's this, and we'll get into that a little bit too in the next apologetics piece. No, you're good. You're good.
That's
Ask
a
the
really
question.
good question, actually.
Because it's this nasty, twisted thing that's happening in the medical community, and it's happening, and it's done in such a way that parents think, this is the best for my baby. My baby is suffering. I don't want my baby to suffer.
But they're not suffering.
Sometimes they are. Sometimes they are. Yeah. Yeah. Now, a little Down syndrome, a little baby who has Down syndrome, they're not suffering. They're happy. They're good. Right? Some of the other conditions are painful. But we can treat pain.
In the womb.
In the womb, we can treat pain.
And they can tell them,
We can do surgeries in the womb. And we can get everything prepped.
Incredible what
Yeah.
you can do.
We can get everything prepped so that when baby is born, we deliver them at a hospital that's ready to go. We are ready.
the cells, why would you go to that length?
Exactly. Yeah.
No, I-
Yeah.
No, that,
And
No, I know.
and some people take that, terminate and try again.
that's a
That's
wonderful.
Right.
what they told my daughter.
Terminate and try again? Yeah. Yeah. Which also has underlying in there the idea that human beings are replaceable. Yeah.
I don't know how many people in this room have actually been faced with that situation. My wife and I had a wonderful first child. We ended up having 4 children total. Our second child was diagnosed as having a heart condition at 12 weeks.
Yeah.
It would be serious.
Mhm.
And so to have the doctor actually say those words to you, we believe it's in your best interest to terminate this pregnancy,
Yeah.
was very difficult, and I was 25 years old at the time.
Yeah.
And I can see how family can
Totally.
end that life very quickly right there.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful that my wife and I were both raised in families that had strong Christian beliefs, that all life is precious, and we're going to let the Lord decide how this heart is going to turn out.
Yeah.
And she carried it to full term. And we ended up having a baby girl who was over 10 pounds, 10 pounds, 2 ounces, slightly over 40 weeks. They wanted the child to be as strong and as large
Yeah.
as possible.
Yeah.
And then they went in and had corrective surgery. And, all those things worked out. Except the Lord took her 3 weeks later, after she was born.
Yeah.
Surgery didn't correct it.
Yeah.
So that was very heartbreaking. But I didn't make that decision.
Right.
I can live with that.
Right.
I didn't take that child's life. And so when people ask me about abortion, I have a personal story that I can certainly share.
Mhm.
And I would, now you have one that you know somebody who was 25 years old, and you know somebody whose doctor told them to abort a child, and that they are not feeling guilty at all because they let
Right.
God
Right.
have that child. We held that child and we took care of that child.
Yeah.
And she has already received the kingdom of God, and I'm hoping that she'll be the first to greet me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Her name was Laura, which means to laugh. Laura. And so she brought joy into our life. And she, like I said, I always wondered if she would have been my first child, would have felt that same way about having additional children. From there on out, all of our additional pregnancies, they were testing us for
Yeah.
potential birth defects.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And some people forgo all testing because I don't want the expectant loss. I want to just be in the moment.
So I just
That's
hope
what
that
my wife and I did, which they were amazed. And I don't want to censor it.
No, I just wanted to make sure everyone had a chance to understand that there are people that carry those stories that you have no idea.
Yeah.
You're carrying those stories
Yeah.
with them.
Yeah. Yeah. And it happens more often than we think. Yeah. Yeah.
Share that whenever you can, because those kind of stories stick with people.
Oh, absolutely.
And people don't understand the difference between the disease kills the baby, right? God takes the baby, or I am deciding to essentially play cards that are not mine to play. Yeah. So I'm trying to save myself grief, but in the end, I'm the one who's culpable.
And doctors are wrong a lot.
Yeah,
How
unfortunately.
many stories I've heard from people that have that same story, but it turned out the baby had absolutely nothing wrong with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And whether that was God healing it because of prayers or the doctors were just straight up wrong.
Ultrasounds. So our medical, I don't want to diss on our medical community because they go through arduous training, right, and tons of school. And many of them really do truly have the patient's best interest in mind. Sometimes that gets twisted, right? Human nature, that happens to all of us. Things get twisted all the time. They can't not, okay? But there is a tendency, because of the knowledge, because of the technology, because of the tools at their fingertips, I do see a tendency to want to play God. And if I don't think I can heal, then I'm going to end, kind of a thing. And so, yeah, so there's this kind of fine line to walk between recognizing this is how human nature works. We want to try to take control of things that aren't ours to control. How do we sit with people in the grief? Because carrying those pregnancies are hard. But in the end, it's worth it to know that I gave that baby all the love, and did everything I could to get all the time with that baby that God gave us. And when it was time, he took the baby. That is a very different place to sit and live than where people are. And you read their blogs, and they'll say, I'm so glad we terminated. It was the right thing to do, blah, 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 blah. But for some reason, I can't shake this guilt. Yes, that's what I tried to tell you. Yeah.
And you know.
Oh, sorry.
To add to your story, I'm the father of 2 living children, both preemies.
Mm-hmm.
First one born is 30 weeks. She's now 35 years old. Carrie didn't make it through the lost her in utero. And then the next one was Alan, who was born. Started trying to come to 24 to get to about 35 weeks.
Yeah, don't come out, stay in. Yeah.
Well, they're 26 months apart. And Christian is 35, he's an aerospace engineer. He has a hiatal hernia and slight learning disability.
Yeah.
That's the only side effects
Yeah.
left from
Yeah.
spending the first 2 months in the NICU unit,
Yeah.
in the neonatal unit, where he had IVs every day.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
isolate,
Yeah.
all that stuff.
Yeah.
He had night cares from all the IVs for about 10 years, but he's grown out of that.
Yeah.
And now he's a father.
Yeah. Here's the other side of things, too, to keep into consideration. And then we're going to keep moving because we got more to do. Though I love the stories, feel free to visit me because I sort of collect stories. So I love to hear them. But two things. So we'll use Down syndrome as an example because that's a very common one. There are now countries in the world that have 0% birth rates.
And they brag about that.
For children with Down syndrome, not because they cured Down syndrome, but because they systematically find and abort every kid who's got it. What does that communicate to people who have Down syndrome? I'm 16 years old, I have Down syndrome, what am I being told?
You're not worth
My life is so devalued that they are killing everyone like me. Secondly, what motivation do we have to find a cure for trisomy 21 if we're just aborting everybody who's got it? The solution there is abortion, except that it's not, right? So how is our medical community going to preserve their integrity and honestly look for solutions if every person who walks through the door with an anomaly we advise to terminate? So there's this dishonesty happening in the motivation that is scary to me. It's a cancer that's there. Yeah. All right, we're going to finish this one up. Again, a lot of things are very similar. This is an interesting addition that I have in here. So these are twins snuggling in the womb. You can see this twin has his hand up on this twin's face.
It looks like
Okay.
he's poking his eye out.
These are identical twins. They are sharing an amniotic sac. Okay? Here's twins. These ones are not identical, so unfortunately, it's not the same set. Okay? But even with their amniotic sacs, we're very smushy. Okay? These little guys, their story is that they were born, and like many babies, fussy. Because I was warm and cozy and safe, and now I'm not. The heck is wrong with you people? Taking me out. They drew a sink of warm water, put them in it together. Calm. Oh, now okay. Look at them, they're so happy. Right? So I'm just going to leave you here in the. Are you? Identical or fraternal?
Maternal.
Okay.
They were 5 weeks early.
Mm-hmm.
And spent, thankfully, just a couple days in the NICU. But even when, and then 17 days in the hospital, period. But they was swaddled together.
Yeah.
And when we brought them home, we were instructed to swaddle them together.
Yep.
I love that. I've never heard of that before.
Because of the relationship
Yeah.
that built in.
Yeah.
So what you're saying,
Awesome.
Yeah.
there, I can relate to.
Yeah. And kiddos, they're finding out more and more. This is unbelievable. This happens all the time in the scientific community. Generations ago, we knew things. Then we decided our grandparents were stupid. Now we're doing studies, finding out that everything we used to do actually worked. It's incredible the way that happens. Okay, so one of these things is babies wanting to touch people, right? So baby was born, baby goes on mom's chest. Makes sense, right? Mom is warm, mom smells familiar, mom sounds familiar, and the breastfeeding bond is really important. We got to get the hormones going. It's the golden hour.
When mom talks, it's the same vibration.
Everything, this is good. My OBGYN in Fort Wayne says, mom's chest is baby's habitat, right? This is where baby grows. And the umbilical cord works as a bungee cord. Nurse tries to take the baby, you're still attached. Gotta put the baby back. Stop it. Okay. Then we went through this whole thing where babies are born, we snip the umbilical cord too early, blood goes spraying everywhere, babies are now anemic because they didn't get all their blood back out of their cord, and we're going to take them away, we're going to clean them, and my mother is over here freaking out. Because I'm over here, and I'm crying because I'm cold, and scared, and lonely, and my mom's milk doesn't come in right, because we were separated, and it's a disaster. I turned out fine. Okay. My mom and I still bonded, eventually. Right? Okay, now, all these hospitals are like, oh, well, we're baby-friendly hospitals.
You were.
The Sam Hill does that mean? Baby-friendly hospitals. But they're finally kicking out the formula companies. No. We're not going to mess up this golden hour, right? And we're not going to move mom from the delivery room yet. We're going to leave her there. Just everybody give it a moment to get some things established. And we see the babies do a lot better. And the moms do a lot better. Everything does better. But we had to have all these studies to tell us that what we were doing was stupid before we would pay attention to what people have known for years. The entire history of the world. Everybody knew this. So I don't know. It's way off topic, but it's a soapbox.
Off topic.
It's somewhat off topic. It's maybe not. It's all inside the realm of things. All right. So until it stops pulsing, right? So again, the placenta is the baby's. The cord is the baby's. Here's fun fetal development fact. Uterus, placenta, right? The capillaries connect to each other, but the blood does not go through the barrier. So baby's blood stays here and mom's blood stays here. There's no crossing. Nutrients cross, oxygen crosses, waste products cross. The blood does not. So when the placenta detaches and the umbilical cord, we want to get all that blood back to baby before we snip the cord. So when the cord goes limp, all the blood has gone back to baby, now we can cut it. If you're cutting a blue and red cord, that baby's losing all that blood. And now you get anemic babies.
Now they wait to give them baths and stuff too, because we're taking it away from the mom.
Yeah, just put a hold on everything a moment. Americans with our assembly line mentalities. Yeah. Okay, so this is a fun thing to tell kids about because they're fascinated by it. And coming up here, okay, so here's 35 weeks. You guys saw that before. You can talk about why it's important to gain weight. Here's what babies look like.
I love that picture.
Okay? And here's what babies really look like. This is an end cowel birth. Now this one is a C-section, so they kind of cheated. Okay? Vaginal end cowel births happen less than one time in 80,000 births. Sometimes they're called mermaid births. Okay? They're so cool. So this one is turned so that you...
Plenty of videos, and you should see the videos,
Yeah.
because the nurses will be like kind of touching and patting
Yeah.
the baby.
And the
baby's moving,
yeah.
and it's really
Yeah.
cool.
So this baby essentially doesn't know that he's been born yet. Still snugly warm. You can't see the placenta and the umbilical cord. They're on the other side. But you can see how the sac is stretching.
How crammed in there they are.
Which is why I love newborns. You can tell a newborn because you pull on their foot and then you let go and they go. I just love it. They're spring-loaded. And you can see why. You've been all smushed. Yeah, so this is a fun one. Again, I don't show it to the little ones. I just think they're maybe not ready. I don't know.
One question.
Nope,
How
not dumb.
the-
Oh, sorry, I won't leave yet.
How thick is that sack? Like,
Yeah.
how do they get-
So I don't know that I know it well enough to give you a good comparison. It's thicker than cellophane. It's enough that in order to break it, you need what they use, like a really sharp crochet hook sometimes. Or in this case, what they'll do is they'll take blunt tip scissors. So it takes a little doing, but it's not super thick because it ruptures on its own most of the time. Yeah. Sort of a medium thick. Does that help?
So naturally, in natural childbirth, this is more of a question.
Yeah.
But I'm imagining that it stretches and gets thinner and then breaks.
I don't know well enough to answer that. It would make sense to me that could be how it works. I mean, you get super strong uterus contracting and moving things down, and everything is squishing, and the baby's head, right, is coming, and eventually.
I think
But I think
not as
it's a true tear.
either, because my daughter's last baby was almost born in Cal, but she was having, it kept going back up.
Yeah, because
So
we're
they-
not getting enough flexibility.
It was a midwife, and they did end up breaking the sac. But
Yeah.
The nurse midwives were saying how thick it was.
Yeah. So
Thicker than normal.
Right, thicker
So
than
they kind
normal,
of vary.
which kind of gives you an idea. And some people's are thinner than normal. They rupture way too early. Interesting though, sometimes we get amniotic sacs that heal. Like there have been tears that seal up again, which is cool.
Really?
But I think relatively rare. This is a fun one too, and something we don't have time to talk about in depth today, but I could fill you in on, is the whole idea of why babies don't drown. In water births, why this baby's not drowning, and why babies don't breathe air in the womb. Because little kids see the amniotic sac, they see the bubble, and they think, oh, it's filled with air. No, it's not. Amniotic sac conversations are also really fun to share if you've got a I fell down while I was pregnant story. I fell down the stairs when I was pregnant with my son Thomas. I was super bruised up. I actually still have a bruise. It was 2.5 years ago. I still have a bruise that has not completely healed up. It was horrible. Thomas is totally fine, in part because he's got tons of layers of muscle around him, but also because the amniotic sac, right? He's like, what? Right? You're in water. You're in water. Yeah. Something's going on.
Perhaps where their concept that baby has gills.
Yeah.
Because we can't conceive that there would be anything else.
Right.
so-
And if you're in water, then you need gills to breathe, right? Yeah, so there's all these interesting, I'm trying to make the connections, but I'm missing, because I don't have all the information kind of a thing. Yeah, super fascinating.
So there's something, I can't remember if it's a blood vessel or what, but my grandson, his didn't close because he was born at 25 weeks. But when you take your first breath,
The valve, it's a heart valve.
yeah, it closes off automatically.
Yeah.
Of course, because he was premature, it didn't close off automatically, and they had to do it surgically.
Yeah.
Paralyzed one of his vocal cords.
Yeah. So there's a valve, when your face hits the air, there's a valve that snaps shut. And I believe there's a second one in your heart. I'll have to look this up and make sure. But it changes the blood flow so that your blood is shunted through your lungs so that it can be oxygenated. Prior to birth, your blood doesn't go through your lungs to be oxygenated because there's no oxygen in your lungs.
Right.
It all comes through your umbilical cord. Yeah, it's
so cool.
fascinating conversations, yeah. So this is back to that You Teach page. We're gonna move, again, here's the outline that's got literally everything I just said to you, minus the interesting conversations we've been having. That's not on there. This is a video of me doing this second kind of presentation. Oops, we're not gonna play it. No, I'm here in real life. Okay. So again, presenter's outline, that's what you guys have. And then the student handout is available too. Some teachers like that. Don't give it to them until after the presentation, otherwise they'll have all the answers.
The teacher will?
No, the students will. I don't mind if the teacher has the answers. The way that I've found to be really effective to do, to do presentations in general is, now I'm being watched, is to do a lot of question and answer. Okay, so with 8th graders on up, they think they know many, many things about the world. And they do know some things. And so if you tell them things, not only are they disengaged because they're not doing any work, but they're also like, nah, I don't really think so. Okay, so what do you think? So I spend the time, I try to build the time into the presentation to make sure that it's a lot of back and forth. I'm not giving you the answer, I'm asking you for it. And the beauty of the apologetics realm is that it's good practice for that. So for instance, okay, here's the beginning of this presentation. Okay, this is what we're doing today. So I'll ask the kids, anybody can tell me, what is embryology? And I usually bring bribes, like in the form of chocolate. So and I keep them hidden till the first kid answers the question, and then I chuck them a piece of chocolate. And then all the kids go, oh, now we're on board. And now suddenly it's cool to answer questions because I get chocolate, right? So you change the culture in the classroom when you bring bribes, and that's fine. I think that's ethical. So I ask them, what is embryology? Let's talk about what that term is. Then we're going to talk about what's going on in the U.S., statistics, and then apologetics. What's apologetics? The idea of being able to give an answer. If somebody asks you, okay, how do you know that's true? Do you have an answer for them? Can you explain to them? All right. How do we know what's true? And then I always tell them, feel free to ask questions throughout because I want to hear your questions as you've got them. I want to deal with things as you think of them. So a little embryology, right? In particular, human embryology. Day 1 conception, sperm meets egg, they fuse together, and in that moment of fusion now, you have a whole, unique human being who's alive, right? So these 4 things from the moment of conception. Now, I like to, in schools, every year, I like to come in and do the 3rd grade, the 7th grade, and the 8th grade, and then the freshmen in high school, and then I like to come in and do a really in-depth ethics presentation with the seniors. And the idea is that if I do those same grades every year, I'm catching them on kind of a maintenance sort of a basis, right? So if 7th graders, I'm doing that embryology stuff that we already did, the fetal development stuff, now all of a sudden this is, oh yeah, we did this last year in 7th grade, okay? But we didn't do whole unique human alive. So okay, I'm going to pretend you guys are my 8th graders or my high schoolers. We're going to take each one of those 4 things in turn and talk about how we know that. So somebody pick one, whole, unique, human, or alive. Tell me how you know that from the moment of conception, you're a single cell, and yet you are whole, unique, human, and alive. So somebody raise your hand, tell me one of them. What do you got?
Each is unique.
How do you know that?
Scientifically.
How do scientists know that?
The chromosomes.
There you go. Thank you. DNA, right?
DNA.
Your DNA is completely unique. It has never existed before, and it will never exist again.
DNA that's separate.
Mm-hmm. So there is a time, if your twins were not fraternal, if instead they were identical, then wouldn't they have the same DNA?
Before it split.
So hang on with me for a second. Identical twins. Anybody in here know a set of identical twins? Are they the same?
No.
No. So even when you have the exact same DNA as somebody else, you are still completely unique and irreplaceable. This is an interesting idea to communicate to our youth these days because they don't agree with that. To impress upon them, you are irreplaceable. Yeah.
How do you answer that question when you have somebody in the room who does a set of conjoined twins where you got two heads, one torso, two arms? but-
Like the
Right.
Hensley sisters?
Yeah.
Yes.
Are they the ones from Minnesota?
Mm-hmm.
I actually saw them on
Did you?
the treadmill at the gym.
Ha! That's awesome.
Graduated from the high school, I think.
Did they really? So I don't. This is something that I've been wanting to look into, and I haven't gotten the chance yet because people like to ask about conjoined twins. They're fascinating. In the first 3 weeks of pregnancy, we can have happen what's called twinning. This is how we get identical twins. You have a single embryo, and it splits into two different embryos, which then each work as separate whole organisms. In those first 3 weeks, you can also have those twins reabsorb and join and become one. Now, this is an interesting for a different, larger conversation in the apologetics realm, because people will use this argument. Well, if you can twin and untwin, then it's obviously not a person. We can defend that. Okay? So don't worry, and you can come talk to me and we'll talk about that. It's super fun. Okay. Conjoined twins, I think, and I don't know this for sure, I want to research it, didn't split all the way. So it's not like a tree and a fence where they grow together. It's that the separation was never complete, I think. Yeah, they're fascinating. But because their brains are different, you got two people sharing a body.
And they have different likes and dislikes.
Yep, they got different everything. They're fascinating to read into.
Argue with each
Yeah.
other. And they argue while they're driving.
Yeah. Yeah. But two heads is better than one when you're driving, so.
Which
Yeah.
never helps. Joined or not.
All right, so we've got unique. Good. Some of us more unique than others. How about the other three? Whole, human, or alive? How do you know the other ones? Single cell embryo, you're whole, you're human, you're alive.
Well, your DNA proves
Oh, ladies, we're gonna raise hands. We're gonna raise hands.
if your DNA shows that you're human.
Yes, right, you have human, you don't have banana DNA. You have human DNA. Huh? Okay. And what else? Humans make humans. Pregnant moms don't walk around rubbing their belly saying, oh, I wonder if it's going to be a giraffe. Right? That doesn't happen. Okay? Good. How about whole and alive? Yeah.
Everything is, right there for that person to be the person it is from the, very beginning. And that's, to me, how you know that.
Yeah.
And whole.
Yeah.
Everything is right there.
So in our culture, people tend to confuse parts with whole. Okay? So I like to give people an example of building a car. If I'm building a car, I'm going to start with the chassis and add an engine and seats and gear shift and all these different things until what? How do I know when the job is done?
And you have a whole car.
How do I know when I have a whole car?
You have a whole car when all the parts were present, whether they were together or not. That was what you.
If you're 16 years old and you want a car for your birthday and I hand you a pile of parts, is that a car?
It's a whole car. It's just not together.
When you can drive it.
I know I have a car when it drives like a car, right? I need the thing to do what it's supposed to do. How do I know when I have a whole person? Do moms add fingers and toes to their babies? Do we build babies? No, babies aren't built, they grow, right? Okay, so from the moment of conception, you have all the DNA bound up inside you. That is the coding. Here's the instructions. If I know I have a car when it acts like a car, then maybe I know I have a human when it acts like a human. Well, what does an embryonic human act like? They grow. And they grow according to their nature. There's an awesome quote, I think it's by Greg Kokel, and he says, something that is non-human doesn't become human by getting older and bigger. What is human from the start. Right? You mature according to your nature. So you don't have eyes, you don't have a heart, you don't have a brain, but you're whole from the very start. You mature according to your nature. You grow. Yeah. Yeah.
Does it matter that no human becomes who they are any other way?
Right. This is the process. There is no other process. Yeah. Yeah. Good. How about alive? How do you know that you're alive? You're a single cell. You can't breathe. You don't have a heartbeat. How do we know you're alive?
If you're dead, you won't replicate.
I heard you. What did you say?
I said dead things do not replicate.
Dead things don't replicate, right? You guys essentially said the same thing. Good. Biology has a scientific definition of a living thing. There's criteria you must fit, okay? Things like metabolizing food for energy, cellular reproduction, maintaining homeostasis and responding to your environment. Things like that, you fit the criteria. Scientifically speaking, you are alive. Yeah.
To that point, I think probably everybody in this room has seen the meme. If they found
Oh, yeah.
a cell on Mars,
Yeah.
they would claim it was
Yeah, yeah, right, exactly. And that's, sometimes I go there with the kids and ask, okay, if we're looking for life on another planet, what do we look for? You're looking for something that has these same characteristics, right? Okay, here you are. Scientifically speaking, you're alive. Good. And then moving on, day 16 to 21, somewhere in there you get a heartbeat. It's not that there's a range, like it took you 21 days, but it only took her 16 days. It's that we can pick up a heartbeat at 21 days, but scientists have reason to believe it actually starts sooner. We just can't detect it, which I think is really interesting. We can put people on the moon, but we can't pick up a heartbeat when it starts.
I'm not trying.
Maybe we're not trying, or maybe it's just God saying, have a little dose of humility here, people.
40 years ago, we couldn't pick it up in 21 days.
So there's, technology advances. By 5 weeks, you've got fingers and eyes, lots of things happening. You've been through this kind of portion of it, right? 6 weeks brainwaves, 7 weeks spontaneous movement because of the brainwaves. By 8 weeks, you have all your pieces and parts. And again, with the high school students, right? I'm going to pass these guys around.
How much does that particular set cost?
I think it's $150, but they go on sale, and I can get you the link for it. This is what you look like at 6 weeks old. And all the high school students go, ugh. And I say, well, you're so cute. What do you mean? Okay, so here is a really good, all right, so you can see the amniotic sac, you can see the placenta and the rest of the pregnancy
Did you get
tissue.
pictures that you could use for the, I mean, I know that we could just get them from you, but how did you get copyright or?
So in my notes, this is how I get around the copyright. In my notes, in the outlines, I cite the sources for these because they're just what I pull off
Have
of
you
Google.
ever used the
So
teardrop baby? 'Cause I think that's
it's a fascinating picture. It's never occurred to me to be like, oh, this would be a good picture for this spot.
really.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know why.
I just think it's really
'Cause it does
cool
get
that
used a lot.
Actually, that baby is still alive. The teardrop baby is still alive.
Yeah, that was for those of you who aren't familiar with it. It was a baby who was moved from a fallopian tube. It was an ectopic pregnancy, and the doctor is holding the amniotic sac, and so it's in the shape of a teardrop, and you see the baby inside. Yeah, yeah, similar age. I think it's around 8 weeks, maybe. Yeah. But again, too, that book that I mentioned has similar photographs. Really good to use. Yeah. And then into statistics. So what is today? The is 17th? Okay. I updated these statistics on the 13th. From January 1 to February 13 in the US, we have had over 100,000 abortions in a month and a half. Most people have no idea what the numbers really look like. We abort on average 2,988 kids a day in the US. So I was just at Bishop Lewis High School. That's 6 times the size of their school. And you watch their jaws hit the floor. Because everybody wants to think, oh, it's rare, it's just here or there. 100,000 in a month and a half, that doesn't sound rare to me. In the last 50 years since Roe versus Wade, we're rapidly approaching 65 million abortions.
That's just in the USA.
That's just the US. It's bigger than genocide, right? Everybody knows the Holocaust. How many people died in the Holocaust? This is what I asked the kids. How many people died in the Holocaust?
6.5 million.
6 million Jews. Anybody know the total number? Because he didn't just target Jews. He killed lots of people. 11 million people died in the Holocaust. Okay? Where would you rate the Holocaust? 1 to 10. 10 being awful, and 1 being, it's okay. Where would you rate the Holocaust? I had a high schooler say 15, and I was like, all right, solid. Hey, we are 6 times the Holocaust. 6 times the Holocaust in the U.S. So just giving kids a chance to sort of wrap their heads around this really atrocious thing that we thought happened, and the number is actually twice the size of the number that most people are familiar with, and then we're 6 times that. That's massive numbers we're talking about. For our high school students right now, 1/4 of their generation is gone. Missing. And when you tell them that, that has an impact on them. If there's 15 kids in the room, there should actually be 20. Some of them will latch onto that and say, well, that's overpopulation. And that's a fun thing to chase down. That is defensible on our side. The world is not overpopulated. So that's a fun conversation to have. Okay, we're going to keep going. All the statistics on this screen, though, to be clear, these are not why abortion is wrong. Abortion's not wrong because it gives women breast cancer. We'll talk about why abortion is wrong. But these are things that people tend to not know about abortion, right? And when it's being touted as health care, this is being swept under the rug. Smoking, right? So kids, anybody know how much smoking increases a woman's risk of breast cancer by? Type 1 carcinogen, smoking is terrible for you. How much does it increase your risk of breast cancer? 10%. This is 4 times that. And we never hear about it. Our football
Because
players
people
wear
say
pink.
that's false information.
Maybe I've got the stats for it in the outline, or I've got the sources for it in the outline. Yeah. So this is based on a meta study that happened, right? So we're going to take all these studies and we're going to combine them and do a huge meta-analysis. Yeah. Yeah, it's the same link as with miscarriage. So when you have breast tissue development happening and you're stopping it in the middle of it, it's not getting to change into the different stages that it does when you end up in a full-term pregnancy and then lactating. Breast tissue that has been through all 4 stages and is now lactating is almost cancer insusceptible. For our women, the best way to make sure that you don't get breast cancer is to have a child young and nurse the child. Now, I'd prefer you get married first, right? But when we push our women to go to college, get a master's degree, then start your career, then have a family. And in the meantime, they're on hormonal birth control and maybe have an abortion because they got pregnant when they didn't want to because their hormonal birth control failed them, right? We are setting our women up for breast cancer. And we see the chart mimic the abortion rates.
I love that holistic, because people are starting to be, younger people are starting to be more holistic. So you're saying, that if you do things in God's timing, your health is gonna be good for that.
It is a different way of looking at things than what our culture currently looks at it, because the priorities are different. Not that women shouldn't have master's degrees and careers, but I think that the aggressive way that our culture promotes that right now is doing serious damage to our women's health.
It's not that, it's to their fertility too.
Mm-hmm.
And so then all these women are doing, extreme things like
Yeah.
IVF and
Now I waited too long, now I need in vitro fertilization. Yeah. Couple it with the statistic below it. 50% of women getting an abortion in any given day have already had at least one. And that means they're entering that 79% risk category. And that's just risk from abortion, right? So these are big numbers we're talking about. 1,500 women a day entering that almost 80% risk category. 64 to 68, and I'm going to move fast here because we're running out of time. 64 to 68% of abortions in the U.S. are coerced, as reported by the women. We hear about forced abortions in other countries, and I let the kids pull up the definition for coercion. They get it eventually, right? What is coercion? Okay. Again, if you make them think about things, then they're engaged and they're bought in because they came up with the idea themselves, right? So how do we keep our kids engaged? Well, you gotta give them a chance and sit with them in the awkward silence while they try to figure things out. That's okay. I can just sit here and look at you while you try to figure it out. That's all right. Or help them along. So give me the answer you do have, and let's see if we can workshop it. Yeah. So coercion, right? We get a definition for coercion. 60, 40, 68%. Okay? That's 2/3 of the abortions happening in any given day in the U.S. are forced abortions. Ask that mom, do you want to keep this baby? Her answer is yes. And yet at the end of the day, she ends up with no baby because someone in her life is forcing her into the abortion. Now, I have friends who are ardently pro-choice. You think this is what they're advocating for? No, but they're unaware that this is what's happening. Or they've been so indoctrinated that they say, well, this is really what's best for her. Really? Because she doesn't think that. And I thought we trusted women to make their own decisions. Didn't we trust women to make their own decisions?
But the argument that a woman is not in the right time to make a good decision about that.
Yeah.
She has someone trying to help her through that.
Uh-huh.
I'm not saying that I'm on that side. I'm just
Yeah.
saying, how do you address that argument?
Well, first of all, there's court proceedings that need to happen before you can really declare that, right? So if somebody's trying to say that, you say, okay, well, where's your paperwork that says that? Because if you don't have something that says she's not of sound mind and you have custody, like you, or guardianship, I think it's called, then that's not the case. And interestingly, too, a lot of these are parents. Parents forcing their 16-year-old daughter to have an abortion. That's illegal. You cannot force a minor to have an abortion. Right? So there's...
Force anybody to have
So
an abortion.
in that, now if you're out on the sidewalk, right, there are strategies to use with people who are going into an abortion clinic and claiming that kind of thing. In dialogue, it's hard to chase down those situations because it's what ifs. Right? You can build any sort of a scenario. Show me the real thing, then we'll talk about it. But I could build a bajillion what ifs that you'd never be able to answer because it's just namby-pamby theoretical stuff. Yeah. So are we talking an actual situation, or are you just conjecturing kind of a thing? Yeah. Yeah.
Now, again, I come from Minnesota, and there were laws on the books already protecting women's rights.
Uh-huh.
And now, after Roe versus Wade has been rescinded,
Mm-hmm.
and we have a completely Democratic governor and two houses that are Democratic, they put another layer on top of it, those protections. And so, knowing the laws are against you, yet you're trying to raise families
Yeah.
in Christian environments, but mom, dad, the laws say I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like we have a lot of hurdles still to get over, because family conversations are not strong enough, but there are laws on the books. Our culture must believe that these laws are important to put on the books. Why do I have to believe it? Well, you don't
Yeah.
have to believe it, but we do.
Yeah. And this is why it's important to do that apologetic stuff with your kids, inside your church, inside your schools.
And in your homes.
And in your homes, right? With all of the stuff in this presentation, I don't mind bringing God into it. I'm happy to talk about God. And there's lots of places where he fits in, right? In most of the apologetic stuff that's the third section of this, I don't talk about him, not because I don't like him, but because I want to be able to defend it from natural revelation. Because in the State House, that's what's convincing. Can you show using logic and science that this person is worth protecting? And you can. It's defensible, and God gave us natural revelation, so let's use it. I think a lot of Christians are scared to leave God out of the conversation. Well, we're not. He created the universe as a witness. Right, Dad? As a witness. He just said that yesterday in his breakout session. And so let's use it. Yeah, but the conversation has to be had. The last statistic is scary, and so you can point that out in whatever kind of way you want to. And then into apologetics. How do you talk about it? The first piece is compassionately. If we have huge rates of forced abortion, then compassion makes a lot of sense. Not only that, but people who choose it, it's not that they wake up on a Saturday morning and say, oh, I'm going to abort my baby today. That's never how it works. And most people getting an abortion have been lied to about what it is and what it does. So compassion makes a lot of sense. Not only that, but people who have shared their stories with me who have had abortions, there's some similar threads. They describe it to me like living in a black hole. There's nothing to live for. I don't deserve anything. They're self-harming. They're addicted. They're depressed. They're suicidal. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. And if you research post-abortive groups in the U.S., almost every single one is Christian-based because there isn't healing for abortion without Christ. It doesn't work. So inside the Christian community, we are uniquely equipped to be able to reach out and pull these people out of that black hole that they're in because we can share Christ's love with them. And his redemption covers abortion. Right? This is a sad thing about our churches in the U.S. not talking about abortion. When our churches don't talk about abortion, they're communicating one of two things. Either abortion's not that bad, or the gospel's not that good. So Christians have to talk about it.
And pregnancy too, because if you have a good-sized congregation of like 100 or more, and you have kids in it, and you're not having a pregnant teen, you probably have kids that have had abortions.
Right. Yeah,
And
pastors
parents who have taken them.
pastors who say abortion's not an issue in my church. That scares me. So compassionately, right? Not only that, but it invites conversation intelligently. You're going to use stats that are good stats, right? Don't fudge things because you can't remember. Just say it. How many times in here this morning have I said, I'd have to look it up, or I'm interested in researching that more, I don't know, right? I'm happy to say those things because it's honest, and I'm interested in being intellectually honest. And then using a common baseline, that's that natural revelation piece. This is the basis of the pro-life argument. Anytime you're in conversation with anyone, this is what you come back to. This will always help to clarify. Killing an innocent human being is wrong. Abortion does just that. Therefore, abortion is morally wrong, and so ought not be done. We need to find better solutions for the problems that face us than sacrificing somebody inside the crisis. Right? What time are we? Are we over? Boo! I got the time wrong. I thought we had more time. All right, well, I'm downstairs. I'm happy to talk you guys through this the rest of the way. Come visit me. You've got my contact information so I can connect you. It's all right. It invites that kind of story, but we're going to get out of the way because I am being rude to the other speaker.
Is that your baby?